Hey guys, the following is my interview with Jim Scott, who recorded Californication and By The Way. In this interview, we talk about both records, how John Frusciante records guitars, Anthony Kiedis records vocals, Chad Smith records drums, Flea on bass, and much more. So Jim, having worked on both the Californication and By The Way records, what was it like working with John Frusciante at the time? How did he approach recording guitars?
John never sat in a chair. He always sat on the floor and played guitar. He just had cables and plugging in one pedal at a time. One thing that I loved about it is, and I remember specifically, is the song "Scar Tissue," which is a great song, and it's a heavy, important song when you look at the cast members that created it. John didn't have a lot of equipment at the time. He didn't have a lot of guitars. I think he was sharing a roadie, with Flea to, help him change his strings and things like that. And I have some equipment. I'm a gear collector, and I have a studio, so I've got guitars and amps and whatnot. And I did back in those days too. So I usually brought a snare drum or a bass drum or a guitar or two to all the sessions that I worked on, just in case. And the guitar solo on Scar Tissue, John actually played one of my guitars. He played this old Fender Jaguar that I have, that real rubbery guitar solo, slide guitar solo, and that was really, I enjoyed that a lot. I got a kick out of that.
That is so cool. That's actually really, really awesome. Not many people can say that they have their guitar as, the instrument on like one of the biggest solos ever. That's pretty sweet.
He actually asked me if he could buy my guitar, which I thought was really nice. And I said, I can't sell it to you, but let's go shopping. So we went up to, I think we went up to Black Market Music. There used to be a place in LA called Black Market Music. And we walked in, and there was a red one. There was a red Jaguar hanging there, like a early 60s, and I think he bought it. I think he still has it. The guitar work is funny. If you listen to it, for me, like some of his rhythmy kind of chordal, strummy, Jimi Hendrixy, up and down the neck, that's amazing. What he does is amazing. And then it had to be a choice, but some of the guitar solos at the time, and they've grown on me, but the guitar solo in Californication is a really tiny, skinny little sound, really plinky almost, and it almost feels like he's like looking at his fingers when he's picking the notes. It's a really simple melody, and he obviously can play guitar great, but some of the solos almost sound like they're struggling a little bit. And it must have just been he was choosing to play it like that. He wanted it to feel like that. And the same with the slide guitar. It's pretty rubbery. It's like, as far as slide players in the world go, there's some, it's like, it's humble. It's humble compared to guys that really, the people that you think about playing slide guitar, the Derek Truxes of the world and the DeWayne Allmans of the world and whatever, those kind of guys. And then to have John play guitar on Californication at that time, it felt like, even though I'm sure it's exactly what he wanted to play, it still felt like he was still regaining his strength to me. John had just barely come back from a horrible addiction and a horrible time of his life. And he was great, but he wasn't, the leader that he is now. He was holding his own, but he was not strong like he is now at that time.
When he was in studio, could you tell that he was recovering, or was he like okay to go, so to speak?
Oh, no, he looked really good. I mean, I hadn't really spent much time with recovering junkies before, and he really hit some low depths, and but it was more, I didn't have a relationship with him. I didn't know him. And he certainly didn't come across in the studio as being big or gregarious or, outspoken or anything. That's, Chad, you walk into a room with Chad and instantly everything's great, And you walk into a room with Flea, and even though he's, he has sort of he can have a bit of a distant personality at times. He's a really great guy, and he likes to have fun, and he's a real prankster and a joker, and he's not shy or anything. But John was quiet, he was shy. He was, these were his first sessions back. He really didn't have much equipment. He had a couple of amps that they got from somewhere that weren't really like the cool ones or anything, just had a couple of amps and a couple of guitars and one or two pedals. And it wasn't like full touring pedal board rig situation. It was John sitting on the floor with patch cables plugging in. I think I'll try this pedal now. And I'll try, it was very, very humble.
Really?
At the top of that record.
Well, that's really fascinating to hear. I mean, by the end of the record, did he seem more comfortable, or was that more or less how the whole vibe was throughout the making of that record?
Well, I think his personality stayed the same. I mean, John, even in that state and reinventing the Chili Peppers as they were at that time, he had a lot of responsibility because he sang obviously all the harmonies and all the background vocals. For the most part, he played all the other keyboards and synthesizers that appear. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had Greg Kurstin play a few things mysteriously, and we could have had anybody that we wanted, but John was a tinkerer and had synthesizers and keyboards. But that record's really simple. It was obviously recorded on 24-track tape because Pro Tools might have been invented, but we weren't really using it yet at the time. I wasn't anyway, and so it was really easy. You had a drum set, you had a couple of bass tracks, a couple of vocal tracks, a couple of guitar tracks. You still got room on the tape, empty tracks. It's like, it's not that, it's a very simple record. It's really, really pared down. And I think for me, that's why it sounds so great, because it's loud and clear and there's no reverb and there's no delay or effects. It's pretty much exactly what those guys sound like when they play at a garage party or in a studio or at the Forum. That's what they sound like.
That's so cool.
So
when you guys are finishing up like his guitar tracks, do you guys double his tracks, or is it a solo track we're hearing?
I think everything was just one take. He would do the take. He might play it a few times, and we would pick one. I don't think they're all like comped together, one note here, one note there. As I recall, when he was happy with the solo was done.
So all of John's guitar parts, you guys recorded it with him sitting on the floor?
Yeah.
That's actually really cool. That's really interesting. Was it the same way for By The Way? You did the same thing?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. We didn't do him in the control room like we do now. Sometimes it's more fun to have a guy in the control room. But he liked to sit near his amps, and John's pretty private. By then, John had regained his full strength and his full power and his full credibility, and he was the leader of the band. He was a lion. He was amazing. And he was the major creative force. And in looking back at By The Way is way more complicated. There's background vocals on everything, several guitar layers on everything, big keyboard layers on everything. And John did all that. He had these modular synthesizers that were complicated, and he would spend hours getting sounds, and same with his guitar parts, and same with his background vocals. And John is a super talented guy. John definitely, especially in the By The Way record, he definitely led the sessions, because once the bass and drums were recorded, there's not a lot of percussion. There's not a lot of tambourines and shakers and bongos and that kind of stuff on those records. So Chad was essentially done. Flea was essentially done. And Anthony would, there were many times where he didn't cut any kind of a vocal with us as we recorded the song. He would do his vocals later or finish the words later. And he would often record, we set up a studio for him in a hotel, and he would do his vocals at a hotel, which was a really good idea, because you can't sing 12 hours a day. And for him to like rent a whole studio and only use it for 3 or 4 hours was, cost prohibitive. So he just rented a nice hotel room and set up a mobile recording studio there. and the the price of a really nice hotel room is a lot cheaper than the price of a recording studio. So he could come and go from the hotel room, or stay there if you wanted to, or just go there and hang out. It was nice, you know. So that was different. On John's solo records, though, the one that I did with him, called Shadows Collide with People.
Oh, cool.
It started out as a much more collaborative effort between he and Josh Klinghoffer. It was a kind of a John and Josh project, which was great. And they were great friends, and they were buddies, and they were writing songs together, and they were both in the studio together, and there was a lot of happiness. And those records are much more dangerous and chancy, and just trying different things, trying to get different kinds of drum sounds by just not doing the usual, let's do it this way because we always do it this way. Like, it was more like, let's try something really different. Why not? If we hate it, we'll find something that we like, you know? So John didn't really have to ask too many opinions when he was making his own record. He was very much in charge of, like, this is how we're going to do it.
That's cool. So you just pointed out that John and Josh work together. If I may ask, if you had to compare the two of them, this is just a general question, how would you compare John and Josh as guitarists?
Well, you'd have to look through time to answer that question. At the time that I was there, Josh was not the same kind of guitar player that John is. And John, by then, making his own records, and with the success of Californication and being back on his feet for 5 or 6 years and being really strong and playing guitar all day long every day, John's great. You know, John is great. He practices all day long. His whole house is filled with instrument and music and records. And he gets up in the morning and puts on records and just plays to records all day long. You know, at least he did at that time. And I don't exactly know how he and Josh got to be connected as friends, but I think they hit it off as guitar playing buddies and songwriting buddies. And I remember Josh being great, but I don't remember him ever taking the heavy load at all away from whatever needed to be done. I feel like John kind of still led the sessions, and Josh was, he was great, but I don't remember him ever like taking it away from John in any way. That's an answer, you know. But then you got to remember that's a long time ago, and that was only one record with Josh. I haven't seen Josh in several years. I ran into him at a party a few years ago, and he looked great, and it was great to see him. But I haven't worked with him on anything else. I haven't seen him.
Do you know if Josh's connection to the Chili Peppers was through John?
Yeah, it had to be. I mean, I think so, because I know that after we did the Shadows record, he kind of went out on the road with them as a second guitar player. There was a tour or two, or maybe more, where he was actually in the band and up there, doing extra stuff, because their records got more complicated. If they wanted to play one of the newer songs, who's going to sing all these harmonies, and who's going to play all these keyboard parts, and who's going to do that stuff? So I think he filled in. I never saw the band with Josh in the band, but I think that's what the role was. They just needed more muscle up there.
So what was it like working with Anthony Kiedis on the Californication and By The Way records? Was there any particular way you and Rick Rubin approached recording him?
Well, the only thing that we did with Anthony almost every time is we used a certain microphone on him. The microphones are funny things. They're instruments, they're tools, and you got to find one that suits your voice, and you got to find one that you're comfortable with. And he ended up singing on both of those albums. He sang on a really common Shure microphone, a Shure SM7, which a lot of podcasters use now. It's still for sale. It's like a $300 or $400 mic or something. But his voice just hits it just right. And Anthony's worked really hard on his vocals. He was taking voice lessons all the time when I worked with him, with one of the best guys in the world, Ron, who is like the voice guru to all the stars. Anthony takes his job really seriously. And not only that, but he's got to write the words. And he's got to be Anthony, and he's got to have that attitude, and he's got to bring, he brings a lot of character to the voice. I don't know if, I don't think people would ever say he's got the widest range or that he could sing the highest note or the lowest note, but sounding like Anthony is no joke. And you got to say what you want to say so it's clear and sing it at the same time with attitude. And, it's taken him a lifetime to do that. And he does it great. And he did it great then. He always has. But I don't think he was ever like, hey, I'm the best singer in the 8th grade. Let's start a band. I don't think that was ever his thing. I think he was just the guy that ended up on the mic.
That's awesome. Do you remember if Anthony was the kind of vocalist who would record for a few hours straight, or would he space things out more?
From what I'm just thinking about, I would think he would probably sing a song, 10 or 12 times and then call it good. Like, that's about all I need to do right now. Let's take inventory and see how good we are and play that back. So, if a 5-minute song, sing it 10 times, that's a solid hour right there.
That's cool. Would his vocals be doubled a lot?
I don't think there's a lot of doubling. Maybe on some of the choruses. Yeah, and then no effects either. Just no That's place cool. to hide. Like, here I am. Here's my voice, really loud.
That's cool.
Really loud and really dry.
So what was it like working with Anthony Kiedis on By The Way?
Anthony would, there were many times where he didn't cut any kind of a vocal with us as we recorded the song. He would do his vocals later or finish the words later. And he would often record, we set up a studio for him in a hotel and he would do his vocals at a hotel, which was a really good idea because you can't sing 12 hours a day. And for him to like rent a whole studio and only use it for 3 or 4 hours was, cost prohibitive. So he just rented a nice hotel room and set up a mobile recording studio there. And the price of a really nice hotel room is a lot cheaper than the price of a recording studio. So he could come and go from the hotel room or stay there if you wanted to, or just go there and hang out. It was nice, So that was different.
Interesting. So going back to Anthony's vocals, why was the Chateau Marmont Hotel chosen specifically as the place for him to record?
It's a great old hotel. I don't know if you've ever been there or stayed there.
I've been there once.
Great old hotel. It's very industry savvy and industry heavy, and a lot of celebrities go there. You can walk into the place, but they do kind of, there's enough security and enough privacy that you can kind of just be you. It's not the first time it's been done. But I think he just did it just because why not? Why wouldn't you want to go there? You go for a little lunch and go up to the room and put on your headphones and work for a few hours, and then, I don't know, maybe go sit by the pool or walk down Sunset and have a meal. Why go sit in a dark old recording studio when, some bunch of other knuckleheads are in the other rooms trying to stick their head in to see what you're doing? Why just go have a little privacy? And again, you can't sing 12 hours a day. And, he didn't really need an audience. So we just just buy him a microphone and a compressor and send him up to a room with a guy with a tape recorder. Or I think By The Way, we had a Pro Tools rig for him that so he could do more vocals and keep more things, and they could do more processing, just because the technology had caught up with their needs. That's not the first time. I did it with a record with Grace Potter.
Oh, cool. 10
years ago. We're recording a record here at my studio with her, and she lived basically down around the corner. She had a house down around the corner from the Sunset Marquee, and we just decided, what the heck? Let's just take some stuff. It's cheaper to rent a room, a cabin, like one of those cool little rooms, houses, little bungalow, and you don't bother anybody and sing during the day. And singing's not loud. You work in headphones, listening to somebody sing. And you can do a lot of work real quickly. And then, again, you can step outside, go to the bar, or stick your feet in the pool. It was fun.
That's cool. So was it only Anthony's vocals you guys did at the Chateau Marmont, or did the rest of the band at any point come by?
I don't remember anybody ever coming by.
Did Anthony ever record his vocals for By The Way with the rest of the band, or was all of it done at the hotel?
It seems to me that just because I spent so much time with John, I don't remember doing very many vocals with Anthony at all. If I had, I'd have had notebooks with lyrics and comp sheets, and I'd have had like hours and hours in my, days and days, vocals, vocals, vocals. So I think that he did most of those vocals at the hotel and either used, one of the other engineers that Rick was using at the time, Andy Sheffs or Sylvia Massey or Dave Schiffman or somebody would have been up there doing it, wasn't me.
So how does Flea approach recording bass? What's it like working with him?
He's spectacular. I mean, Flea bounces around, Flea's very energetic. He's funny. He's smart. He's very musical. He plays a bunch of instruments. He knows a lot about the bass tone. He always, I remember when I forget what song it is on Californication, sort of a reggae one, forget the one. And we were trying to just like get that reggae dub. We were just trying to get like, all your favorite reggae records, you just put them on and they're just gigantically fat. They're just like, how do you get that sound? Mm-hmm. So, here we are, the best studio in the world with the best microphones, the best console, the best bass player. And we're trying to like get it to sound like that. And he's trying and I'm trying and just putting more bass on it and more equalizers, more compressed, more tone, more just trying to dump it in. And sometimes you just can't do what your idols did. Sometimes you got to be in Jamaica with a really bad console and a bad tape recorder. And that's how you get that sound. There's no other way. It's a funny thing, but no, Flea's great. And always prepared. And like, I don't remember hardly, the only thing we would ever fix is if he changed his mind and wanted to do a different sequence or something, but it wasn't like, oh, I just got to play it again because I'm terrible. It's like, no, he went down with the drums. I don't think we ever overdubbed a whole bass track ever. Right?
Really?
The bass and drums went together. That's how you get that, and that's how they play. That's what they do.
So in general, with Flea, like how many takes would you guys need to do then to get his bass tracks?
Well, just thinking back about Californication, I know we did Parallel Universe in just 4 takes. I'm like, yeah, it's sounding pretty good. Let's try one. But 18 minutes later on take 4, it was like, well, that record's done. Thank you.
That's cool.
We only tracked for 12 days and tracked probably close to 20 songs. So 1 or 2 songs a day. By the time you get to the studio and have lunch and get sounds and change the drum heads and tell a few stories and do a few takes and do 2 songs, have dinner. You don't play it 20 times. You 10, 5, whatever. Stop and start a few times. Change the guitar sound, change the bass sound, put on a new drum head. It all takes time. They say the old joke is, well, it only takes 3 minutes to record a hit record, but that's not really true.
That's funny. So I mean, with Flea, is there any particular type of mic that he likes to use to record his bass parts, or is that totally up to you, more or less?
Well, it was up to me at that time, but I was fortunate enough to be working at a really great recording studio, and Flea's bass, I think he kind of brought his bass rig from the tour, so it was big and it was pretty loud, but it wasn't loud for the sake of being loud. It was loud for the sake of the tone. But loud is not particularly dangerous for microphones if you don't mistreat them. So we put real expensive microphones on his bass cabinets. We used kind of like the Beatles did. We used tube microphones, old Neumann tube microphones, not directly on the speaker, but in front of the amp to listen to the sound of the amp. And I'm sure we had a microphone right up inside the speaker, like a more typical dynamic microphone recording the bass. We also recorded a DI, which is really common, a direct inject, just straight off the strings, not through an amp at all. And you blend those sounds together, and you can sort of mix and match to make the sound. And that's pretty normal. It's just not every studio has that expensive of a microphone to put in front of a bass amp.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But Ocean Way did, and it was fine. We didn't hurt it. It was all good. This is that Ocean Way.
Ocean Way, gotcha. Okay.
Ocean Way, cello, east west.
Gotcha. So from a purely technical angle, is there anything unique in your opinion about the way Flea plays bass?
It's funny. I only ever did one other session with Flea outside of the Chili Peppers. I was doing a session somewhere for somebody, and Flea was the designated bass player of the day. And I don't remember it being a really good time.
Really?
it was. I mean, you know, Flea could play anything. He could play any song for any artist right now. But you know, he's best in the Chili Peppers. I think he plays with his fingers. I think he just plays the right thing. I think he's super funky and got great time and is a very creative bass player. He thinks a lot and doesn't just play the chords, you know. He's moving around. He's got a lot on his plate because it's not a big band. There's not a lot of guys. He's got to do a lot.
Interesting. That brief period that he was in Jane's Addiction, were you surprised that he joined the band?
No, it was music business is pretty small. All those guys were tight anyway.
So what was it like working with Chad Smith? Do you remember how you approached recording his drum parts?
Well, the way I recorded him for the Chili Peppers record and the way those records sound is that they're kind of, especially kind of for Californication, it's essentially a mono sounding record. You know, the guitar's in the middle, the voice is in the middle, the bass is in the middle. And, you know, it doesn't really make any sense to like put the floor tom way over here and the hi-hat way over there. And we would try things like, well, let's take John's guitar and put it over on that side. And then you're listening to it and you're just looking over there the whole time. It's like, well, this is where he belongs. There's only one guitar. So what's he doing over there? You know, bring him back in. So even though Chad's drums were recorded in stereo, they're pretty mono. I think that's what makes Californication so big. It's not a mono record, but it kind of is. You know, it's just there. It's not like over here like that. Chad, if you think about rock and roll drummers, like, you know, not only do you know it's the Chili Peppers as soon as it starts to play any song from any era, but whenever it's Chad playing the drums, he's one of a handful of drummers that his drum sound is his drum sound. Anybody can get it. I didn't invent Chad's drum sound. Chad invented his drum sound. I recorded it properly, but anybody that records his drum properly, that's what he sounds like. And there's only a few other drummers that I think you can say that about. Alex Van Halen was one of them. He had a drum sound that was his sound. Stuart Copeland from the Police, you know, his sound that was his sound. Almost everyone else, Bonham, probably John Bonham, although he you know, the recording style back in those days had a lot to do with it, but he had a sound. But you know, of all the other great drummers in the world, they're kind of like chameleons. They'll play whatever sound you want for whoever artist, whatever band, whatever snare drum, whatever. You know, it's just like it's not any kind of a moral judgment. It's just an observation. Like, Chad's got a drum sound. That's him. He sounds like that all the time, and it's really fun to watch him play because he's so great, and he's a big dude, and he hits them really hard, and that really affects how you put the microphones and record it onto tape. And there's a lot going on with that kind of power, and I'm proud of it. You know, I think it sounds great.
Oh, for sure. So I guess then in general, I mean, that perfectly leads into this. Like, what's Chad like as a drummer to work with? Is there anything unique about his approach to recording drums?
Well, he really hits hard. You know, he's a sensitive drummer and he's a sensitive guy, but even on, he just, you know, he's just got an impact. He really hits the drums hard, and, you know, you've got to change the heads often to keep them sounding fresh. He's really creative. It's not as simple. What he's playing isn't as simple as it looks. I think he's got a lot more chops than people give him credit for. But he's such a great showman, and he's just, you know, he's just Chad. He's up there, he's got his hat on backwards, and he's just playing great and smiling, and everybody, and it's like laying it down. But he's a really excellent musician.
That's cool. I mean, the backwards hat thing just reminded me when the whole Will Ferrell, Chad Smith kind of joke started going around. What did you think of that? Did you think it's actually true that they look the same?
Yeah, I always thought that they did. I mean, you know, that obviously that came to light in the drum battle on the TV show. But
Yeah.
I thought that way before,
That's funny. Are there any other funny stories of Chad or the band in general you'd be able to share?
Well, there's some that I can't share.
For sure.
Some that I will share. So I mentioned I went to Budokan with them to Japan to record some live shows. And we're up there in the first class lounge, waiting for the plane to call us. So they finally call us, like, okay, first class, we're ready for you now. Everyone can come. So, some people, everybody's picking up their bag, and some people sort of head out, and we exit the first class area, and there's a barricade, not a barricade, but like a rope, like do not cross this rope, like yellow tape kind of a thing. So we're walking down the corridor, and there's a bunch of kids out there behind this tape. There's a bunch of kids, and they would come out through the door, and then they start cheering, and they start like, yeah, there's this noise, and then they break through the gate. They break through the thing. They're running. It's like they're running down the hallway that we're all heading for the plane down the corridor, and the Chili Peppers are like, oh, here they come, here they come, and they charge at us, and they run right past us to this very famous young Japanese ingenue model.
That's hilarious.
We had no idea who she was. Very, very world famous. We all laughed. We all thought it was so funny. You can't help it if you're famous. And when people are running at you, you think they're coming for you. And then they weren't. So I did go out with Chad in Budokan a couple nights. And we had a handler and an interpreter, which was fantastic. But, when he gets recognized, and, when there's more than one person, he can get himself out of a crowd. But he usually just ends up like, just ordering a bottle of champagne and giving it to him, and then we escape.
That's funny, man.
Californication we had, for a record of that size, for a record of that importance, we were in the studio tracking for just 12 days. And I think nowadays, if somebody said, I'll give you 12 days to track a record, they'd jump up and down and say, well, I'll make 3 records because everybody works so much quicker now. But we recorded probably over 20 songs. I guess what I'm trying to say is Californication was done very quickly. We recorded all the basic tracks in 12 days. We did 5 days of overdubs at another studio. And then we went to another studio and mixed for 20 days. The mixing process isn't that it takes all day long to do the mix. It's getting the mix approved is what takes time, because they wouldn't sit there all day long and watch me mix. I would make a mix, and then by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I'd make CDs for everybody. And we had this motorcycle delivery company, and they would show up and they would zoom off to everyone's house and take a CD to Rick, and take a CD to Chad, and take a CD to John. And everybody's job was to listen to it and then send me comments so I could, do updates and touch up the mix.
That's so cool.
And so, somebody's, it's like, oh man, I just got my CD, but I'm just walking into a movie. I'll call you in a couple hours. Oh, I just got my CD, but I'm just sitting down to dinner. I'll check it out in an hour or two. So it was common that I would wait or leave the mix up overnight. And I was mixing on a console, analog console. So there's nowadays people mix in the box. Well, a lot of people do. I don't, but a lot of people mix in the box. So it's like a word processor. You can open and close a letter from last week just as easily as you can open a mix from last week. You open up your laptop, open up the mix, turn something up, turn something down, process it, send it. There you go. There's the changes. But that's not how we were working then. So everything was done in real time until we got our system together. Somebody would call and say, turn the bass up, and somebody else would call and say, oh, turn the bass down, and somebody, turn the guitars up, no, turn the guitars down. And so you can't do both. So finally all the comments would come through Rick. He would decipher what needed to be done and what changes needed to be made. So the 20 days of mixing was mixing, obviously the songs that went on the record, and then all the other stuff that didn't make the record but has shown up later. And then I'm looking back at my notes, there was probably 4 or 5 of the songs that we remixed after listening to them for 3 weeks going like, I think we could beat that one. So you put it back up and you just beat it, you know. But it was all real time, all analog, rolling tape.
So, I mean, right now you mentioned that the mixing took about 20 days, whereas the tracking took about 12 days. Is that typical for the mixing to take almost twice as long, or was that unique to Californication?
Well, you know, I can't, you know, it's hard to say. I think the problem is, like I said, it was just getting, you know, 5 people to listen and then comment. You know, an hour or two could go by, and then an hour or two, you know, anything could happen. You know, you got to find a place to listen where you're comfortable. You got, you know, maybe I send the mix at 4:00 and they're at the beach or something. You know, they don't know when the mix is coming. They don't know how to schedule. They're not going to sit around all day and wait for the CD to show up. And then they got to listen to it. Then they got to think about it. Then they got to, you know, everybody had Blackberries then, I think. So Blackberries are going around. Everybody's texting everybody, trying to, what do you think? What do you think? And then finally somebody would call me, or Rick would call me. Or sometimes I'd leave the studio and drive up to Rick's house and sit there with him and listen to it and have him give me notes and then go back to the studio. So 3 or 4 hours going by in a studio every day for 20 days adds up to a lot of extra days.
Yeah.
And do that on 14 or 15 songs. So probably half the time was spent sitting around. I got really good at ping pong. Got really good at ordering food from restaurants.
That's good. That's important.
No, with all respect, it's just what it takes. It happens now too. You know, when you mix remotely, when you send somebody a mix, you can't expect them to be staring at their screen waiting for your email to come in. They have a life. They might be at the supermarket, or maybe at their, you know, they're maybe doing their laundry at the laundromat. You know, they got to go someplace and like listen to the mix and concentrate and write down their notes, or call you, or Blackberry you, or text you, or something.
Yeah.
So, you know, real time, especially if you got a 5-minute song, takes forever. You know, you can't speed up the process. It's the laws of physics take over. It's like time, it just takes the time it takes. It seemed very quick to do a record of that magnitude back in the day when bands would take months and months and months. To do a record in 30 days or 35 days was really fast. That 2 weeks went by very quickly. We did a lot of work, a lot of days, and I honestly don't remember the days being that long. I don't remember, you know, starting at 10 in the morning and going till 2 in the morning. That would happen later with overdubs when John, like on By the Way, we worked much later with John into the evening and into the night when he was doing, you know, a lot of the overdubs. But the Californication record was, you know, that was a gritty little 3-piece band on the floor playing music, and that's what they did. We you know, they just play, and we take a little break for some food, play, have a little dinner, play, go home. It was really joyful, and it was fun. And, you know, I felt very loved and welcomed by them during that.
That's awesome, man. So if you had to pick a favorite from all the Chili Pepper songs you've worked on, which would it be?
Oh, man. Well, I like Californication. And the reason I like it so much is that's what Chad Smith sounds like. That drum sound is killer. And that drum sound is his drum sound. And Flea always sounds great. And Flea always serves the song. And he just has such a great sound. And he's such an amazing bass player. Like, the bass was always easy to do. Once he liked his sound, he never unliked it. You know, he committed. And it was kind of John's rebirth back into the world. And it's really simple. It's a simple song.
So with Californication, did you record the band off the floor, or was everything done in isolation?
No, it was somewhat isolated. I mean, that room, that Studio 2 at Cello has one big sort of flimsy ISO booth that, you know, back in the 50s when they built that studio, they really weren't thinking that people were going to play that loud or I don't know, whatever. But no, we had Flea's bass rig in a room with enough isolation that if he made a mistake, which he never did, or if he wanted to replay it or fix something, the leakage wouldn't be a problem. And the same with John. The amps were not in the same room as the drums, but they were close enough that, you know, there was some leakage back and forth. So yeah, it was all done at the same time. Those three guys played, and that's what you hear on the record.
That's cool. And was it like that with By the Way? Was it mostly isolated, or did they ever play off the floor together?
Yeah, no, mostly isolated, but they all played at the same time. It's just, you know, the isolation is just, you know, the phenomenon is you want to protect the quieter sounds from the louder sounds, and vice versa. You know, you don't want something to get polluted by another sound if you don't have to. You know, sometimes leakage works great, and it all together now, one for all for one, everybody play. But it's nice to have that control, so that if you change your mind and want to play a different bass line or play a different guitar line or try something different, that what you have played before isn't so loud on the record that you can't erase it or change your mind. So that's all. We did both those records at this, you know, a few years apart, but we did them in the same studio and very much the same. Drums were in the same place, bass was in the same place, John was in the same place. Just the difference of more. We did a lot. I remember doing a lot of background vocals with John and a lot of keyboard parts and a lot of guitar parts. By then, he was really leading the band, and he really didn't have. I don't think anybody was saying like, "Hey, man, I don't think we need all those background vocals." They were like, "Yeah, go ahead and put the background vocals on. Sounds great."
Interesting. So, in addition to the Californication and By the Way records, you also had a hand in the Chili Peppers album One Hot Minute, but from what I understand, there was some controversy during the making of that record. What exactly is the story there?
The first day was kind of a disaster, and nothing sounded good, and speakers didn't sound good, and the console didn't sound good, and nothing sounded good. And second day, we tried some other stuff, and I rented equipment from Los Angeles, and you know, one thing led to another, and it was just sounding terrible. And everybody's looking at me like, "Come on, engineer, what? You know, this is what's going on here." So, to make a long story short, after 3 days, it sounded terrible, and I knew it sounded terrible, and I knew that it probably wasn't my problem, and it wasn't their problem. There was just some phenomenon in that studio at that time where something wasn't right. And they were all frustrated and looking at me, and Rick hadn't come to the session yet. And I finally just said, "Well, look, I think I got to go. I think I've got to make this easy on everybody. Just, you know, stay here, find another guy. I've done my best. I got to go." And so that's basically what happened. I kind of let myself off of the One Hot Minute record, except that they all decided, like, well, maybe he's right. And they all followed me down to Los Angeles. We went into Sound City the next day and set up the session in like 3 hours, and it sounded amazing. And then back in those days, part of my job with Rick was to set up sessions and then hand it off to another guy and then go on and do another record. And so I got it all set up and handed it off to Brendan O'Brien, I think, at the time, and they made One Hot Minute down at Sound City. So that was 1994. And then I really didn't run into him again or see him again until Californication in 1999.
Well, that's a really interesting story. I mean, was that always, like, let's say the original studio for One Hot Minute sounded great. Was it always the intention for you to set it up and then head out, or is that something that kind of just developed?
Well, you know, Rick Rubin is a super talented guy and super prolific and very busy, you know, producing 2 or 3 records at a time all the time, and running a record company, and generally being a really cool guy. So it wasn't uncommon for me to be working on 2 or 3 records at a time with him. Sometimes I would just, you know, get a record started and then hand it off to somebody else to do. They got ready to do One Hot Minute in 1994 with Dave in the band. Mm-hmm. And I got asked to engineer it. And of course, man, the Chili Peppers, you know, they'd had Under the Bridge, they'd had a bunch of big hits, you know. I mean, they were really happening. So getting asked to do a Chili Peppers record was fantastic. And I'd been working with Rick Rubin for many years before then, and you know, Rick always produced their records, so I was kind of Rick's guy at the time.
When you were on One Hot Minute, did you ever actually get to see them recording anything?
No. Well, I think we actually did, but everybody was like, bummed out. It just wasn't sounding good. I mean, we did try to all play together. It was a beautiful studio, and a million hit records were made there. I don't know what the problem was. I tried everything that in my power to get it to work, but nobody liked the sound. It wasn't just me. And I don't know. It's just like the planets weren't aligned or something. But,
I hear you.
You know, Dave had a little bit more of a process then. You know, when I worked on him on the Lowen and Navarro records, he just came in and we gave him a guitar and he played the song and that was it. He's pretty quiet. But by the time we did One Hot Minute, or they were doing One Hot Minute, he was Dave Navarro. You know, he was like the man. He was, you know, so he had a process. He had a bunch of amps and he had a whole rig and it was complicated.
I hear you.
But he's sweet. He's a super sweet guy. You know, it's just like his process was the process. You weren't ready till he was ready. You know, but it wasn't a great environment. But we did play together a little bit. I don't know if any of those recordings exist anywhere.
Really? That's interesting. So in general, having worked on By the Way, Californication, and to an extent One Hot Minute, how exactly did your relationship with the Red Hot Chili Peppers begin?
I met Flea, actually, in July of 1983. In 1983, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
In 1983, I was an assistant engineer at the record plant in Los Angeles, and I was, as we did in those days, one of the senior assistants would have free studio time overnight and would do demos with bands, local bands, and so it was a little out of my league, but I was assisting another guy who was doing a demo with a band, and the band was called What Is This? And Hillel was in that band.
That's cool.
And so that night we were recording a song called Mind My Have Still I. And I remember Flea came bouncing in, very young at that time, 1983. You know, he was a young man and full of energy and everything was great. And we didn't really exchange numbers or connect or anything, but that's the night I met him. And there was also within a day or two of him getting his Jimi Hendrix tattoo on his arm.
Cool.
And I remember that he very proudly took off the Band-Aid to show us his fresh tattoo.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, that's all right. You know, that's really good. So I met Flea in the 80s, but, you know, then time went on. And a little later, I met Dave Navarro.
Cool.
He's the cousin of a really good friend of mine, Dan Navarro. Dan Navarro is a singer, a songwriter, and I made a lot of records with his band. He had a band called Lowen and Navarro, and they wrote hit songs. And Dan actually wrote the song "We Belong," big hit record for Pat Benatar, and they had a record deal back in the day. And Dave came in as a really young kid, just starting out in Jane's Addiction, and played, you know, from like. This was a real folk rock kind of record, so he was struggling through an acoustic guitar part just to get his cousin on the record. So I met Dave when he was a little kid, and I met Flea when he was a little kid, and then, you know, and then time went on, and they had their career, and everything was going great, and they made a couple of records. It's tiny. Music business is tiny, and it's even smaller now. I mean, when there were big record companies and a lot of employees and a lot of A&R guys and office people and managers and everybody had a team. It seemed a little bit more big, but now, but you know, I mean, I've just been around a long time. And I know a lot of people, but you know, you're basically one phone call away from just about anybody.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that a lot, actually. I think that's really cool.
I mean, they might not want to talk to you, but you know, if I wanted to get to somebody that I hadn't met, but I wanted to talk to about something, I could probably get to them in a phone call. You know, whether they take the call is something else, but It's not like, how do I get in touch with, you know, Adele? You know, I've never met Adele, but I know a bunch of people that know her well. So it's like, I suppose if I had something to say to her, I could find her, or Bruce Springsteen. You know, I mean, if you wanted to, you know, or Neil Young. I've actually met Neil Young, but if you wanted to like work with him, sorry, forgot about that. But you know what I mean? Like, if you almost wanted to get to just about anybody, you could. Somebody knows them.
Yeah, it's cool. I like that a lot about the business. I think it's actually a nice touch in such a, like, again, like from the outside, it seems like it's such a huge thing, but once you start to get to know people, it's like, oh, everyone knows everyone. I like that. So it's kind of cool. Music
business is tiny. When we talk about Mike Frazier, I worked with him for just a short minute on an AC/DC record.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was great. We were doing it together. He did it, but Rick wanted me there. Rick Rubin wanted me there. It was the Razor's Edge record, I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
So Mike and I were doing it kind of together in New York, and there's really a long story about that. But it was the night they opened the Hard Rock Cafe in New York, and so we were invited down. So we got in, we worked, and then we got in a car and we went down there and we all piled in, and it was fun. It was like a celebrity kind of night. It was fun. So then after a couple hours, we're all going to kind of walk back to the hotel, which wasn't far. New York, you walk. So it's the band and Mike and a few of us, and so we're walking down the street, and it was stoplight. You stop there, and a few people see Malcolm and Angus. They go, hey, all right, guys, and then they go like, hey. So you walk another block and stop at a light, and then now there's 30 people. And they're going, hey, then you walk the next block, and then now there's 50 people. And it's awesome. Like, oh, man, what are we going to do now? So they had this roadie, he's famous roadie. I forget his name now. I wish I could. He was famous, roadie to everybody. Famous roadie. Great guy. And it gets to the point where it's too many people around them. Yeah. So he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out it's dollar bills with their picture on it. With Angus's picture on it, and he starts throwing money up into the air, going, goodbye, everybody. So money is floating all through the air, of course, and everybody's scrambling to pick up the money, and then they just start going, goodbye, everybody, goodbye. And we walked off, and everybody was happy. Everybody got a little thing. Everybody got a dollar bill. Everybody got an AC/DC souvenir. So, there's a way to get out of a crowd.
So in general, what does your experience working with the Chili Peppers mean for you?
Well, listen, man, I've been really lucky. I worked hard. Everybody that has my job works hard. We all work hard. But I've been lucky to have, the relationship I had with Rick Rubin was really great. And he opened a lot of doors for me. And in return, I gave him a lot of really popular records. I helped him make a lot of really popular records. Johnny Cash, Tom Petty, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Danzig. A lot of records that I did with Rick are important records in an important time period. And we were hot during the 90s and the 2000s. That we had a lot of Grammy nominations, Best Rock Record, a couple of victories there. And for me personally, just to have those experiences, to be that guy at that moment, and then to be lucky enough to have some trivia expert like you want to talk about it. No one cares. No one cares what you did 30 years ago. I worked hard. I missed a lot of birthday parties, but that was my choice. Anything can happen. Everybody's human. So you got to play it a few times to just get the pocket, get the feel good about it, communicate, get your tone, get your headphone mix. 2 or 3, 4 takes can go by before you're really like, all right, now I'm getting hot. Let's go. Now let's go. So maybe take 6, 7, 8. And back in the old days, before I learned how to do what I do now, people would just go, yeah, man, those all felt really good. Yeah, fantastic. I think we got it. Come on in. Let's listen to those. So you listen to take 1. No, that was bad. Listen to take 2. That was no good. And then you play them all back, and then somebody goes, well, which one do you want to use? Oh, I don't know. Which one did you like? Oh, I kind of like 6. Oh, which one was 6? Is that the one where I made the basement? No, that was 4. Are you sure? How about 7? No, 7 was one where we did, remember, there was something wrong with the intro. So it just took forever. And then if you wanted to pick a piece, let's use this verse and this chorus and this verse and this chorus from this take, that take, this take, that take. The process of editing the tape was like a magic show. It would be like, now we're going to cut the tape. Everybody watch this. It would take a couple hours. And now with Pro Tools, you can do it in a couple minutes. And also now I pay attention, every take, every beat, every second. And I personally, and I think all engineers and producers do this now, there's no reason to listen to take 1 if you're not going to use it. The intro at take 4 was the best one, so that's going on the record. The middle bit, it could be 3 or 4. Well, if we started on 4, let's use 4. Let's do a minimum of cuts. Let's play that back. Let's see if it's any good. And that's if you don't get it in one take. You know, the Chili Peppers did get a lot of stuff in one take. That's the take. We're not going to try to beat that. But the record-making process has changed. Mm-hmm. So I have a note-taking system, and I pay attention. And budgets aren't what they used to be, and bands don't have 37 days to make a record anymore.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note, in terms of newer material, what do you think of the Chili Peppers single Black Summer?
Well, that was fantastic. You know, I only listened to it on my computer like everybody else. I just saw it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I can't really, it didn't, and then I listened to it. I thought Anthony sounded great. I thought his vocal was spectacular. I thought the guitar work from John, I mean, that's some clean, beautiful, you know, he's got that soulful Stax Atlantic meets the Chili Peppers, great thing going. He's really good. It really sounds spectacular.
Hey guys, the following is how Californication the song was made. If you like Kurt Cobain and Star Wars, then Californication is the song for you. It was released as the fourth single from the Red Hot Chili Peppers album Californication on May 20th, 2000, and throughout the song there are all sorts of pop culture references. Essentially, Californication is a social commentary about Hollywood and the entertainment industry. Anthony Kiedis is the band's primary lyricist, and he stated that in his opinion, the lyrics to Californication are some of the best he's ever written. There are people from all corners of the earth who dream of becoming big, huge Hollywood stars. The second line in the song, "Little girls from Sweden dream of silver screen quotation," is a direct reference to this. It's understood that Hollywood sells Californication. The Hollywood, California dream is sold all over the world. Hollywood success is something so many people crave and desire, and because of this, a lot of people are willing to do anything to get famous. Now, I want to be clear that I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be famous, but there is that gray area when people start to abandon who they are and become something they aren't for the sake of fame. That's one of the themes explored in this song. One of the interesting things about how this song came together is that were it not for John Frusciante, this song may not have been included on the Californication album. I'll be getting to that and more in this video. My name's Daniel. If you're new to my channel and you like rock music, make sure to subscribe. Everything I do is 100% DIY. Thanks for watching. John Frusciante was instrumental in getting Californication to sound the way it does, both the album as a whole and the song itself. The song Californication deals with the subject of fame. Being famous is something that John Frusciante really struggled with during his first stint with the Chili Peppers. Here's the backstory. John Frusciante first joined the band in 1988 following the death of the Peppers' original guitarist, Hillel Slovak. Another guitarist, DeWayne McKnight, best known for his work with Parliament Funkadelic, briefly joined the band on guitar following Hillel's death. But later that same year, John Frusciante was officially named the band's new guitarist. Interestingly, John Frusciante and Hillel Slovak knew each other. John was a fan of the band, and in particular, he was a fan of Hillel. As a matter of fact, a few months before Hillel's death, the two of them had a conversation about fame. Hillel asked me, "Would you still like the Chili's if they got so popular they played the Forum?" I said, "No. It would ruin the whole thing." That's great about the band. The audience feels no different from the band at all. There was this real kind of historical vibe at their shows, none of the frustration that runs through the audience when they jump around and can't get out of their seat. I didn't even watch the shows. I get so excited that I flip around the slam pit the whole time. I really felt like a part of the band, and all the sensitive people in the audience did too. Interestingly, and somewhat ironically, it was with John Frusciante in the band, and largely because of what John did songwriting-wise, that the Chili Peppers ended up becoming extremely famous. John quit the band in May of '92. One of the big reasons he quit was because he was troubled with fame. He was struggling with depression and developed a serious drug addiction problem, which he struggled with for many years. In January of 1998, John Frusciante entered rehab, which lasted until April of that year. That month, Flea visited John Frusciante and invited him to rejoin the band. Upon reuniting, the band quickly began jamming together and eventually writing new music. In John's words, "We started in June 1998, but we took some time off for one reason or another. We probably spent a total of 4 months rehearsing and writing, and then we went into the studio and recorded everything in 3 weeks." Regarding the band's first reunited rehearsal together, Anthony Kiedis once recalled the following to Rolling Stone. "When John gets excited, he's like 8 billion volts of electricity. He was knocking things over. It was absolutely chaotic, like a little kid trying to set up a Christmas tree. And when he hit that first chord, it was so perfect. This blend of sounds from these people who I hadn't heard play together in so long." Californication marked an evolution in the band's sound. While it still maintains that signature funk element of the band, it was John Frusciante who suggested that the band become a more, quote, mellow progressive rock act for Californication. The sound of that record had a lot to do with John. Now, going specifically to the song Californication, as mentioned, Anthony Kiedis felt that the lyrics to the song were some of the best he's ever written. But the issue was, as a band, they were having a hard time coming up with the music for the song. So much so that at one point, it looked like the song wouldn't get finished on time to make it onto the new album. In Anthony Kiedis' own words, "We tried 10 different arrangements and 10 different choruses, and nothing ever worked. We'd been working for a few weeks when someone started playing an ultra-sparse riff that sounded like nothing we'd ever done before. As soon as I heard it, I knew it was our new song." One day, John Frusciante came to the studio and began to play some ideas that he had for the song. It was based on this that music for the song Californication came to be. The song was produced in early 1999 at Cello Studios in Los Angeles by Rick Rubin. As mentioned, the song is largely a social commentary about Hollywood and about fame. Personally, I think one of the best lines from the song is, "Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement." Specifically, it's a reference to Star Trek: The Final Frontier. But in a general sense, that lyric could be interpreted as Hollywood being so influential that it's the center of the universe in a way. Even space is centered in Hollywood. There are actually two space references in Californication, the second reference being when Anthony Kiedis sings "Alderin's Not Far Away." It's Californication. Alderin is the planet in Star Wars where Princess Leia was from. In the song, there are references to various people including Kurt Cobain, the Beach Boys, and Dorothy Stratton, a model and actress who was murdered in Los Angeles at the age of 20. The lyric, "Pay your surgeon very well to break the spell of aging," is a reference to how Hollywood often puts pressure on models, actors, and others in the industry to constantly look young, often doing so via plastic surgery. According to Anthony Kiedis, the opening line in the song, "Psychic spies from China try to steal your mind's elation," was actually inspired by someone he heard in New Zealand ranting about psychic spies from China. Californication was released as a single on May 20th, 2000, and would end up reaching the #1 spot on the US alternative airplay charts and the US mainstream rock charts. It also reached the #1 spot on charts in Canada, Iceland, and Poland. To this day, it remains one of the band's biggest songs. On YouTube in particular, it is the band's biggest song. I'll get into that in just a bit. The music video for Californication is a memorable one. The majority of the video is created in the style of an open-world video game where each of the different band members are going through various adventures in California. Shots of the band performing are in the top left corner of the screen and periodically come into full frame. The music video was directed by Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris. As of the time of this recording, the Californication video is the band's most popular on YouTube, at around 805 million views. Other Side is in second place at around 544 million, and Scar Tissue comes in third with 337 million. Interestingly, all three were released as singles from the Californication record. Both the record and the song Californication are extremely influential. Countless musicians have been influenced by them over the years. To date, the Californication record has sold more than 15 million copies worldwide.